good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, so if you can see, I'm wearing a little green, a little pre-St. Patrick's Day Eve flair there. I hope everyone's doing well. As Ginger mentioned, my name is Liz Mahar. I'm the Director of Family and Sibling Initiatives at the ARC. And I'm here today to talk about future planning. I know this group, when Ginger and I were just talking how we connected in August because she asked me to present on future planning back then. And we had some scheduling issues, and I think I was supposed to talk to the group in January and I got sick. I'm doing much better now. So it's a long time coming that I was supposed to come and speak to you all. So I'm really excited about the presentation today. And just want to make sure you all can see my screen here. I'm very excited to talk to you all today. I know this group, when I was talking to Ginger, she mentioned that this group is this group that you all self-direct your waiver services. So you all could probably pretty much give this presentation, but I want to make sure that you all have the tools that you need as far as any resources that the ARC's national office offers. So I know that a lot of you are already familiar with the ARC's state chapter, the ARC of Maryland, but at the Center for Future Planning, we have a lot of resources, videos to support you in your future planning journey. So today we're going to talk a little bit about future planning, and I know this is a Zoom, and it's hard to be interactive because we're not in person. But I'm going to have a couple questions for you later to type in the chat box, just to kind of, so I can just understand a little bit more about you all. And then we're going to talk very briefly about what's in a future plan, what things to consider when you're making your plan. And then I'm going to go and share some of the ARC's advocacy resources and also our website. So a little bit about me, and just so you all know, I have a younger sister with a disability. Her name is Crystal. I have full permission today to share our story. Crystal is 35. She'll be 36 in a couple months. She has Down syndrome. And growing up, my parents, this sort of what brought me to the work is my experience as a sibling. And I know about 8 years ago, the ARC received some funding to develop future planning resources for individuals with disabilities, for caregivers, and for professionals. And so that's what brought me to the ARC, is my experience as a sibling. You know, when I was growing up, my parents would always say, you know, when we pass away, you're going to help support Crystal with her day-to-day life. And I said, you know, absolutely, I'm the big sister. And then my dad passed away about 16 years ago. And at the time, Crystal was about to transition out of public school, and she didn't receive any services. I'm originally from California, and that's where Crystal lives today, and where she was living at the time. She lives at home with my mom, and she wasn't receiving services. My parents, even though she was in school, had never connected her to the system because they were just hesitant, because when she was born, the doctors suggested that my parents put her in an institution. So my parents were not really thrilled about connecting her to the service system outside of public school, because they didn't trust the service system. And I think a lot of us can relate to that sort of sense of mistrust and not knowing who we're working with and who we're engaging with. So Crystal was about to transition out of school. My dad had passed away. I was living already out in DC. I live in Alexandria today, but at the time I was living in DC, and I didn't really know how to support my sister, because I quickly realized that the future plan for my sister, those details were meant for me to fill in the blanks. And I didn't really have any answers to fill in those blanks. So I quickly realized that future planning was really important. You know, it doesn't matter what age you start. I know a lot of people ask, well, what age should we start planning? I mean, planning for anyone happens across the lifespan, across your life. So Fortunately, my sister had some really great teachers, and they helped connect us to the regional center, which is the service system out in California. And so we connected her to a case manager and kind of got to understand what we like to call the alphabet soup of the service system. I'm sure all of you can relate to that. It just feels like when you're talking to people, case managers, and waivers, it's just a lot of new words that you have to learn and understand. So today, Crystal, she works, she goes to a day program, but also as part of that day program, she's able to work at a senior center, which she loves because she loves working with seniors and with young kids. And she also loves dogs. So Crystal has been part of this group for about 10 years. She's been at the senior center for 10 years, loves it. Unfortunately, because of COVID, you know, like many of us, we were home for, I mean, now almost 2 years. Can't believe I'm saying 2 years because we all thought it was going to be a couple weeks. But she used to go to the senior center about 3 or 4 days a week. And now, unfortunately, once they got the green light to go back, she's only been going once or twice a week. So I know that really upsets her because she really loves working at the senior center. But you know, she tells me at least, you know, I can work once a week and see my friends and see the people that I really liked and served at the senior center. So I'm happy that she's able to at least go back once a week to work there. And so Crystal and I keep in touch every day. We text. And, you know, I think the plan is that eventually she wants to live closer to me and my husband out here in Alexandria. We've looked at some group home options. She wasn't really happy with some of the housing options in her community out in Southern California. So the plan is in the future, she's going to be living either with us or near us here in Alexandria, which we're all on board with. And, you know, we just want to make sure that we're supporting her to live the most independent and happy life that she can. So for many of you, like I mentioned before, I think a lot of you can probably give this presentation that I'm giving today. And I know that some of you have engaged with the ARC of Maryland. But if you aren't familiar with the ARC, I want to make sure that you all do understand the organization that I'm coming from. So the ARC is one of the largest national community-based organizations that advocates with and on behalf of people with disabilities. The ARC started over 70 years ago because a lot of families at the time didn't have any options for their loved one with a disability. The only two options at the time were put the loved one with a disability in an institution or live at home with no community support. Like those were the only two options. And so we had a lot of families that advocated and said, no, we want something more. And really that kind of started the disability rights movement here in the United States, where we had families that started organizations at church basements, kitchen tables, because they were advocating and wanted something better for their loved ones with disabilities. So today we have over 600 chapters around the country. We have about 12 chapters in Maryland. We have state chapters. So they do a lot of state advocacy. And then a lot of our local chapters focus a lot on individual programming and services. So what I like to say, though, is if you've met one chapter of the ARC, you've met one chapter of the ARC, which means they're all different. They still want to make sure that they are providing the needs of their community. So that's great because it's still very grassroots to its nature. And we actually have a policy seminar. It's hybrid, so it's going to be virtual and in person at the end of the month. So I'll be sure after this presentation, I'll send Ginger more information in case you all are interested in attending our policy conference, either online or in person. So what is future planning? I know many of you are aware of future planning, but if you're not, I just want to make sure that we all have kind of a clear definition of when we talk about future planning, what does that mean? Future planning is creating a plan, creating a guide for a person to make sure that they're leading a good life and a good life as independently as possible. And so like I mentioned before with my sister, or when people ask me at what age should I start planning? I mean, really, when you ask that question, it's probably a good time to start planning. It's important to have that plan throughout all stages of life. especially when your supporter can't provide the level of support, whether it be a parent, a friend. But I know you all are self-directed. So it's important that you have those plans in place because there's just so many waiting lists for programs and services that we all need. And it's just important to have that plan written down and available so people, and you are aware life changes. I think I like to say a plan is important for anyone with or without a disability. So this is where we get to the point where I stop talking for a little bit and learn a little bit more about everyone in the group. A couple of questions that I have here, just to kind of get to know you all a little bit better, are what are some of your hopes and dreams today, tomorrow, for the future? And what support do you need to make those dreams come true? So if you all just want to take about 5 minutes to think about that, and then type in the chat box, and we can just I can just read off what people are typing in the chat box. So I'm seeing some responses here. So some responses to the questions are, I hope that my child can continue to do all of the amazing things that she loves and lives her life the way she feels fulfilled and important to her community. Provide my daughter a purposeful in life in a supportive environment, allow her to be as independent as possible. I want my son to live as independently as possible, supported by people who care about his well-being and that he can count on to be there when he needs them. A hope dream is have our son live in the community, his own place, perhaps with a roommate, with some living skills assistance. My hopes are having my son to live in my home after I'm gone and to have the supports in place. So a lot of what I like to say, a lot of just, at the end of the day, I think we all just want to live as independently as possible, live in a supportive environment that will listen to us. But in order for those hopes and dreams to come true, there have to be a lot of supports in place. And so that can take time. And so hopefully today we're going to talk more broadly about future planning and sort of the ARC's resources. Before we talk about those resources and some advocacy links that I'm going to provide, I just want to talk a little bit about what we consider the core areas of future planning. There are about 6 areas where we think a plan is really sort of a holistic plan. We're talking about a person living as independently as possible and fulfilled. When we talk about future planning, we want to make sure that we are addressing these topics, expressing wishes for the future, deciding where to live, financing the future, supporting major and daily life decisions, employment and daily activities, and making social connections. So those are the areas that we want to address to include in the plan to make sure that the person with the disability, that you all are living your life as independently as possible in the community with those supports. So when we talk about expressing wishes for the future, we're talking about documenting a person's life history or story on paper. You typically might hear, I don't know if you all have heard of the term letter of intent. And the letter of intent is, it's not a legal document. You do not need a lawyer, but it's basically, the letter of intent is a story, and it's the person's life history, where you document, where did the person go to school? What are some medical needs? What are some important contacts? What are some important celebrations? Religious views? Where does the person live? Just all of those daily routines, all of those items that the person needs to live their day-to-day life, important holidays. All of those things need to be documented. Before you document, it's talking those things through. When we say expressing wishes for the future, is making sure the plan is for the person with a disability, making sure that that person isn't asked. I know a lot of times um, we are, when we talk sometimes, like I'll give an example from about my mom. Sometimes when we're talking to her case, my sister's case manager, we meet once a year to talk about her plan. Sometimes my mom can talk on behalf of my sister. And so we want to make sure, because it takes my sister sometimes a little bit extra time. She needs a little extra time to process a question sometimes and to respond. And so sometimes my mom will just respond for her. And so sometimes I just need to kind of pause and say, well, let's listen to Crystal. Let's hear what her response is. So it doesn't mean that my mom's directing her life, but it just means that she has the answer and is gonna answer on her behalf, because she thinks she knows the answer. And usually my mom does, but for the sake of building those independent living skills, it's important for my sister to know that the plan that we're discussing is her plan, and that she is ultimately the number one voice, who's telling us what she wants and what she needs. And it's important to document it. So we have a template that we will send out over email, that you can start using to, if you don't already have some type of document, to write down the daily routines and all of that important information. We have something that you can use, and it's for free. And again, it's not a legal document, but it's just the plan. And it's important that family and friends that you trust are part of that sort of discussion, and that you can trust them with the information. It's important to take a look at that information once a year, because life happens. Like I mentioned 2 years ago, we didn't think we'd be still talking about COVID 2 years later. So life changes, things change. It's important to look at that plan at least once a year and see, do these details still apply? Do we need to start moving in another direction? So that's what expressing wishes for the future is about. And then housing, deciding where to live. It's identifying. We also have, I don't know if we have it on our website. We have a lot of information around housing on our website, but I know we have a housing checklist. When we think about housing, I know that we're thinking about the place. Is it in an apartment with a roommate, or in a family home with supports? But sometimes we also don't think about like what's around the home. So if someone doesn't drive and relies on public transportation, is it important to live within walking distance to the metro or to a bus? In my sister's case, it's important that she lives near the senior center because her job coach picks her up. So when we're thinking about housing, it's not just how are we paying for it or where we're going to be living, but it's also the community and what needs to be around to make sure that that living situation will make the person happy and live as independently as possible. And then financing the future. I know that a key question that people have are, what are the funds available to pay for a person's basic and supplemental needs? A big part of it, as you all know, it's making sure that you know what you're entitled to as far as benefits, waiver benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, SSI, all, like I said, the alphabet soup of figuring out what to do next, what you're entitled to, what you're eligible for, and then also making sure, what other ways can you save that won't jeopardize those benefits or the services that you're receiving. So ABLE accounts, special needs trust, pool trust. If you are not familiar with ABLE accounts, they are a way for individuals to save and pay for expenses that qualify as disability related expenses. So can be for anything regards to health, education, and it almost acts as like a bank account. And I know there's limits of, I know generally ABLE accounts have a limit of about 15,000 that you can have in there. So it's important that if you do have an ABLE account, that you're always checking your balance. So that's sort of some contribution limits there and what you're able to have. But what's great about the ABLE accounts is they allow the person with the disability to really take ownership of the decision making of how that money is being spent. So that's one of the key differences between the ABLE accounts and the special needs trust. Whereas the special needs trust, you can apply, you can pay for certain expenses, but you need permission to make those expenses and those purchases. And then supporting daily and major life decisions. We think about, I think right now in the last year in the news, people have been hearing about conservatorship and guardianship because of Britney Spears. So that's really, I don't think people like the general public really thought about, well, how does guardianship or conservatorship, when a person with a disability is under that, how does that limit their rights and their decision making? So I know years and years ago, guardianship, and I know the advice is still given out about a lot of schools will say, especially when person is about to reach 18, it's guardianship. Sometimes we get a lot of questions around that at the ARC. And so we like to educate people that, before you think about guardianship or conservatorship, really that's a last resort. Think about what the other options are. So there's power of attorney, representative payee. If you're receiving any government benefits, there's someone else who can support you with managing those expenses, and they call that person the representative payee. And so there's other ways to support people without going straight to guardianship. And I know every state is different. And then aside from the formal supports, there's also just informal ways of supporting a person day to day. I know, like, I talk to my sister every day on text. We text a couple times throughout the day, and we do communicate. Sometimes she does need some help, and FaceTime and text is the best way to communicate with her. And so even though, she might go to a doctor's office and have some questions or be afraid about, recently she was at the dentist. I think we're all afraid of going to the dentist at some point. She was afraid of getting her cavity filled because of an experience she had with the dentist at a previous visit. And so, I just talked to her and kind of gave her some advice. I had a cavity filled a month ago, so I was able to share my experience and encourage her to go through with the appointment. And instead of saying, Crystal, you have to go do that, I said, I understand the dentist can be scary. But I had a cavity filled last month. And so now we're kind of the same. We're sisters. She likes to say that. So that's kind of a way that I support her, rather than telling her what to do, is kind of allowing her to make those decisions by sharing some of my experiences, especially when it comes to the dentist. And then employment and daily activities. When individuals are in school, and once a year, I know the IEP is something that the education plan is something that caregiver, the parents and the individual with the disability and teachers sit down and talk about. At least in my sister's experience, I don't think anyone ever asked her, Crystal, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think they just assumed because she had a disability that she didn't have any dreams around what she wanted to be and what she wanted to do for work. And that's just such an old school mindset of, looking at the person's disability and not their ability. And so it's important to have those conversations when you're in school, or then when you have your individual support plan or your self-directed plan. You might have a job or activity that you're doing, but it's making sure that you're constantly advocating if you want something else, and finding ways to make sure that you're sort of growing along that path. And then finally, social connections. And this is just a way for us to remind people that not just people with disabilities, but everyone, once we leave school, we really have fewer opportunities to develop relationships outside of our family home or sort of our network. And so it's important to think about expanding social networks. Like my sister has friendships outside of me and my mom and our cousins. I know she keeps in touch with family, friends, and cousins through text. But she also has friends that she's met over the years at the senior center, and neighbors. And thankfully, she's able to keep in touch with them. Or if she needs something, she's able to communicate that with them. So, this is an important piece, because in the future plan, we want to make sure that people that are trusted are aware of what the plan is, or if there is a role for them in the plan. that you talk it through with people that you trust. And then we also have some information on our website that I will be going through in a little bit around developing healthy relationships. So before I move on to the website, I wanted to also put a plug here for some of the ARC's advocacy information. So, we talk about the future plan and our hopes and dreams. The end of the day, from what I read, a lot of you want to just have an independent life with supports in the community. I know that a lot of you have self-directed plans, and you all are aware of the wait list and sort of all the complications that can happen. And I think one thing that I, as a caregiver supporting my sister, especially early on before I came to the ARC, what I didn't realize is when we're trying to find a job for her, she's going to need a job coach. I know right now the job coaches, that's kind of been a struggle, at least in, I think around the country, but I know in California, there aren't a lot of job coaches. And so she's been her group where she goes to the senior center and the job coach drives them. They're only supposed to be 3 people, but because there are so few job coaches, they've had up to 4 and 5 people. And so sometimes my sister doesn't feel comfortable going to her job in a car that's packed because she can't social distance. Well, what we have to remember is that funding comes from the state and that funding comes from the federal government. So it's important for us to advocate and tell our stories about what is happening on the ground and to say, this is what we need in order to get the funding for the services that we need to get in our community to live that happy and independent life. So I just wanted to make sure that we have that connection there, because the planning is important, the discussions are important, but if the services are not available, it can be a little frustrating. And so that kind of like stops some of the planning, or you're put on wait lists and you're waiting. So what I wanted to bring up here are a couple items that we have at the ARC that I think might be helpful on the federal level and the national level. If you don't receive, can you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
Do you see the PowerPoint or the Action Center?
The PowerPoint. So if you have a website up, you
Okay.
probably have to stop sharing and then
Yeah.
reshare that.
I'm going to do a new share here. So we have our Action Center. If you do not receive our action alerts right now, I would highly recommend you all to visit the link that I have here, and I can put it in the chat as well. And so we won't bombard you every day with emails, but this is a really good way of understanding what's going on in Congress on the federal level, as far as funding for home and community-based services, anything COVID related, paid leave, anything that we are advocating for. And so you can find, if you don't know who your elected official is in Congress, you can type in your zip code and then sign up to receive our email updates. That a lot of times there's a call to action to call your member of Congress, email them. And then as you can see, we have different ways for you to take action and then share your story. What's really important here is, I know that sometimes people can get a little intimidated by talking to their member of Congress or sharing their story. People will say, well, if I share my story, I don't know how to share my story, or will it matter? And we always say, yes, it does matter, because your senator, your representative, they work for you. I used to work for a couple members of Congress on the House side many years ago. So having been on that side, I know that members always want to hear when they're voting on what matters to their constituents. So yes, your story does matter. And we have ways in our Action Center, some tips when we say share your story, some questions to help guide your responses in how you're sharing your story. So it's important to just kind of be aware of what's going on. And I know we are always collecting stories for a lot of different areas, especially around home and community-based services. lately, but we're always trying to collect stories to make sure that people in Congress understand what certain decisions, how they're impacting people on the ground. And then our next, see our next link here. Is our National Council of Self-Advocates. This is volunteer-based, and it's a way for individuals with disabilities just to get involved in what the ARC is doing. I believe they host meetings a couple times throughout the year. And I know that at our convention, we have a self-advocate symposium. So it's a full day session for people with disabilities. So this is another great way for if you're an individual with a disability and you're looking to get involved at the ARC. I highly encourage you to visit our National Council of Self-Advocates page here, and I will put that in the chat as well. And then our last piece here is, if you're looking for resources around how to share your story and how to advocate. Last year at the ARC's convention, we actually had what we called the Advocacy Power Hour, when we've had that actually the last 2 years. And we talked about the importance of advocacy, sharing your story, and how to advocate on the local, state, and federal level. So this YouTube link here is a recording of that session that we had at convention last year. So if you're interested in just kind of learning more about advocacy, we have some great, we had a great lineup of speakers, people with disabilities and siblings that shared their stories. And then one of my colleagues talked more about the importance of advocacy on the local, federal, and state level, and how to do that. So those are just some free resources for you all to take a look at when you have time. Are there any questions about about future planning in general, or about the ARC's advocacy resources? And I'll take a look at the chat here to see if there are any questions. Okay, so someone mentioned they'd like to talk more about the future planning document. So that's a great segue into our website. And I'm actually going to put a link to the website in the chat so you all can also take a look at it while I'm talking through it. And so we developed this website over 7 years ago. We've built it over time. And when we built the website, the topic of future planning, there's so much involved with it. And we wanted to make sure that when people came to the website, that they felt like they were not overwhelmed by sort of being pulled in different directions. So we wanted to nicely lay out an online resource center where people understood, okay, this is what future planning means, and quickly can be directed to resources. So the homepage here is just sort of an about page of the ARC and our Center for Future Planning. And then I'm going to go into our Learn section. And so this is just a Future Planning 101 with a video where people with disabilities share their story about why future planning is important. And so on this page, we kind of go a little bit more into what's involved in a future plan. I talked about that at the start of this presentation a little bit. And then some questions to start thinking about when you start having those conversations, or as you continue the conversation, some questions to think about around planning. And then the Who Are You section, we developed this because we wanted people, if you were a person with a disability or a parent or a sibling or professional, these are some the sort of different people that we thought, okay, these are sort of the people who are typically involved in the planning. And so when you came to our site, we just wanted to make sure that there was a home for you on our site so you can learn more about your role in the planning process. So we talk a little bit about the importance of planning for that specific purpose or their role. We have then some resources on how an individual with a disability can become a better advocate. We have a plain language document about how to start talking about future planning. And then we also have a link here to our stories page. And so we call this our stories video gallery. It's our see how others have planned section. And these videos are also sprinkled throughout the site, but we wanted to have a direct link. And it's all people who have disabilities share their story around how they were able to plan for that specific topic area within future planning. So we have a video here about the importance of decision-making, about housing, what to know about public benefits, ABLE accounts and trusts, building a career. So we have a lot of videos here. And I think when you have time, they're not very long videos, but they're just, again, short stories of people with disabilities sharing how they were able to plan in that specific area and overcome any challenges that they had. So each sort of individual bucket here, so the parent, also similar overview, and then we have a link to the stories page that I just shared, our video stories page. So that's our who are you section, and then our where to start. Those are the 6 key areas of future planning. I quickly went over them, but here you're going to find more information. So let's go to supporting daily and major life decisions. You'll see one of the videos here from the video gallery. And then we have a plain language document, and then just some more information about decision-making, and then why most people with disabilities don't need guardianship. And then more resources here about myths, guardianship myths. I know I talked about this a little bit at the start. And then more documents. We have information in Spanish as well. So these are one of our decision-making documents here in Spanish. And then if you go to deciding where to live, it'll follow a similar format. You'll see a video, some information. And then let's see, we also have the plain language document. So each section will have a plain language document, a video, and then sort of an overview. So we wanted to kind of follow that. So people need information in different ways. Some people prefer to view video, others read. And then we wanted to make sure that if you're reading, that we're developing the plain language resources so everyone can understand. And then we have our webinars here. We have webinars about 4 times a year. And so we have a webinar coming up April 28th that we're co-hosting with another group, but here's a list of all of our webinars from over the years. So if there's a topic that you saw that you didn't see in our Learn section, take a look at our archived webinars, and you'll probably see, as you can see, we have a lot of topics, all the topics under the sun here. And then find resources. So if you need to locate some resources, we have our directory here. And then I went over our video gallery. And then this is the urgent needs section that we developed for the type of situations where people didn't have a plan or don't have a plan. And it's, there's an emergency situation where a person wasn't set up with services and a caregiver can no longer support. There's never discussion. And so in that emergency situation, we kind of we show people sort of who to contact first to kind of start developing some type of plan in that emergency situation, sort of the emergency plan, and then encourage people to do the broader plan once they're sort of over that crisis. And then those are our, that's our Learn section. And then we have a tool called the Build Your Plan tool, where you can set up an account for free. I already have an account here, but what you would do is go to futureplans.thearc.org, and I'll put that in the chat. And you can actually set up an account for free after you answer some questions, and start to develop your plan. So if you prefer to do something online rather than write it down, we have a section here, all 6 areas of future planning. And you go through all these questions. It takes about an hour per section. And then you go through all of these questions based on your responses. The Build Your Plan tool will say, okay, this is what you need to do next, or this is what you should consider. If you don't have a response to that question, then there's automatically a to-do list that's created for you. So that's what you see here. It's, you know, you'll stop there and then you'll have kind of this to-do list developed for you. And then you can view the plan here. And then there's an ability for you to share your plan also. Because if we have it, the account is, so if you're a parent or a person with a disability, those are 2 ways you can navigate it. If you're like a sibling or another type of caregiver or professional, you can also create your account as if you were the parent. Those are sort of the 2 areas that we, what we do, or 2 paths, as we like to call them, that we developed. But we know that there's other people in the planning process. So we didn't want people to go into the Build Your Plan tool and have access to the account and start making edits. So, because there really should be one person who's driving the plan. And so you can put in your email here, an email of the person who you want to also see your plan, include a message, and then share it with them. And what they'll do is then they'll receive an email with a section of the plan that's been shared with them, and then they're able to view it and then provide comments on what should change or any other comment that they have on that section of the plan. And then you're able to print your plan. And let's see, I think that's it. Oh, this is when I mentioned that there are the questions, these are the questions that you have to answer before you develop your plan and create that account for free. So that is it for now. Are there any questions? And I just wanted to say, I know that some of you might have some questions that are very specific as far as Maryland resources. I am very familiar with what we can do on the national level, but I don't have a crystal clear view of how to navigate, you know, a specific situation for Maryland or for, you know, all around the country. I would really have a lot of information if I did that. But I am not super familiar with every service system around the country. So if you do have a question and I can't answer it, I'll let Ginger or Liz maybe follow up with you afterwards to help navigate your question. We will have the slides available to you afterwards. Ginger, I'll send you a copy, a PDF. Are all these planning tools specifically for self-directed clients or anyone who has autism? Yes. I mean, these documents, the Build Your Plan tool, the resources here, it's for anyone who's planning. So if it's self-directed, if it's not self-directed, these resources are meant for you to learn more about future planning. So that could be self-directed, that could be not. So, and it's for individuals with autism, anyone with a disability. And someone wanted to take a look at the letter of intent as well. So I'm going to go and look for that and put it in the chat as well. So this is the letter of intent that if you do not want to create a plan online, you can print this out and fill it out and make sure you take a look at it at least once a year. Someone asked again about the slides. The slides will be available. Someone has a specific question here about DDA. I think, Jean, you might want to follow up with Ginger and Liz just to see how they can help you, because I wouldn't be able to provide you with resources on how to do that in Maryland. Like I mentioned, this is the letter of intent. So it breaks down sort of there's 5 parts to it. So there's an about me, general information. And so these are all the important parts of a person's life that you want to fill out and take a look at. So the point is that you start having these discussions about the plan and then write it down. So some of this information, like the about me, you'll have answers to that pretty quickly, or your daily routine. But the where I live, this will change over time. Daily activities and social connections, that also changes over time. I know some of my interests change over time. So this is just sort of a good communication tool for you to have among your group of people who are part of the future planning team. And then as far as who would get the letter of intent, that plan that I went over, I mean, it's anyone who you trust. What we like to say is the future planning team. So that can, it's the person with the disability is the number one. They're the team captain. Think of it that way. And then if there's a parent or other caregiver, a sibling or job coach, anyone you trust, and that you trust with this document and with this information, who plays a large role in your life. Any other questions? Question about participants coming together with supports to form a cooperative living facility or house. I've heard about this a little bit, like in Illinois and a couple states. I'm not familiar with how that all happened. So if you're thinking about that, I would maybe reach out to your DD council or housing agency in Maryland to start thinking about that.
Okay, looks like that's pretty much it for the questions, and we're getting close to the end of the meeting. So thank you, Liz. This was really great. You can see comments in the chat saying, oh, there's so much information.
I know.
So
and we don't want to overwhelm you. And so that's why we set it up the way that we did. So if you just want to really read all the information that we have on finance in the future, you can easily do that. Just go and take a look at that information. Or decision making. So it's not really meant for you. We wanted to set up the online resource in a way that people can come back to it a lot and read through the information. If you want to read through it all at once, be my guest. I know that for my sister and for me and for our family, it's much better when we just kind of take bite-sized pieces of it.
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much to the members. The recording, the slides, probably some of the links will be posted on our website. We're also going to be standing up a future planning page where we will just simply have a ton of links, including all of the ones that were provided today, and then some additional things, some of them specifically to Maryland, just all the resources. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we would like to put together a future planning subcommittee. So anybody who is interested, please send us an email at info@marylandsds.org. That is in the chat. And Liz, if you would put that in, Liz LaFrance, would you put that in to the chat so that people will have that handy? So again, like I say, thank you so much, Liz Mahar, because this was absolutely wonderful.
Great. And you all have my information, so feel free to follow up with me. And Ginger, I'll send the PDF version of the slides to you as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So anybody who is interested in the bill that is currently going through the Maryland legislature, Patty is going to give us an update about that. So Patty, if you can unmute.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we're right smack dab in the middle of the legislative process. So my texting is going off crazy because, you know, this is the time when things are already heard in the different committees, that all the sausage is getting made. You know, all the conversations are going on about, you know, who needs what information and what's the best strategy and all this. So we're kind of right in the middle of it. So the HB 1020, which is the Self-Direction Act of 2022, was heard in the Senate on March 8th, and it was heard in, and then SB 868, same bill, was heard in the Senate on the 8th. So the bills have been heard. The Senate is just kind of sitting on it, waiting to see what happens in the House. The House Health and Government Operations Committee sent it to subcommittee, which met this past Monday and heard the speaker's presentation on the bill. And so the opposition currently is a very large fiscal note from the Maryland Department of Health. So right now, as the sausage is getting made, that is these conversations going back and forth between the sponsor and Maryland Department of Health. And then the subcommittee chair has asked for a revised fiscal note. So I can tell you that the members of the committees that we have seen and heard, whether it's mostly the House, the HGO committee, and then some of those members being on the subcommittee, the Public Health Committee, heard you. They got, so one of the committee members said the other day that our phone was ringing off the hook about this bill. So you're telling your story and contacting the members of the HGO committee and the Senate Finance Committee is definitely having an impact. Now, you know, the bill may or may not go based on the fiscal note from the Maryland Department of Health. You know, the legislators may not approve something that has a big fiscal note, whether it's an accurate fiscal note or not. We believe that there are some erroneous numbers. There's some inflated numbers based on some false assumptions that are being made by the Department of Health as they come up with this fiscal note. There's very little we can do to impact that. But the takeaway here is the process is happening. There's a lot of support in both the Senate and the House for this bill. So we have a chance. We'll see what happens today. It's continuing to make its way through the process. If it doesn't pass, it will be because of the fiscal note that's attached to it, the amount of money that the Maryland Department of Health is saying it would cost to do the things that we've asked. It won't be because the legislators didn't get enough support. They clearly heard you, and they've let us know that they want to pass this bill because they've heard your needs. So that's the right off the hot presses today of where we are right now. Subcommittee, Public Health Subcommittee of the House meets again today. So we'll know if it keeps going or it stops. And that's so back to the future planning. I just wanted to say one thing. Many of you know I've been doing self-direction since day one as a nurse. And what I've seen is that, you know, self-direction has caught on, and now there's close to 2,000 people self-directing their services. But now we're at a new stage of evolving, and all of you have established programs or established self-directed lives. Now you're saying, how can it continue? And what's going to happen when I'm gone? That's a new demand, and that's great. But realize where we are in the evolution. So I believe that over this next year, led by all of you, continuing to have the demand for how are we going to continue self-direction when you're not here to support your individual. So the groundswell is happening. There are no answers to that question yet. Self-direction is evolving in the state of Maryland. There's no answer as to how this is going to continue. That is to be determined. So I encourage you to be active either with SDAN subcommittee that Ginger's going to pull together. Really, we don't have the answers. SDAN doesn't. but we need to gather your concerns and gather your energy and gather your demand so that we can present to DDA what are the needs, not a broad need that we need this to happen when we die. We need specific needs. What is that going to mean? So that's kind of the work of the next year. And, you know, get your thoughts together on all that. I mean, because you are part of a groundswell of demand that there be some sustainability of self-directed services. But don't be surprised with the fact that it's not there yet. It's not. There is no answer yet. But, you know, continue to say, like, what does that mean for the person you love? What would need to happen? And maybe, you know, by the next year, we'll actually get somewhere on this particular issue. Thanks a lot, you guys. I'm getting back to my text messages now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patty. So that pretty much is what we had to say today. So please keep in touch. Let us know. info@marylandsds.org, and we are actively putting together a working group to study this, the whole issue of future planning in the context of self-direction. Please give us your input. All right. Thank you very much.